Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this evening's community conversation on faith-based responses to the Israel-Hamas war. Tonight's conversation is hosted by the Embassy of Israel to the United States, the Consulate General of Israel to the Southeastern United States, as well as the Philos Project. Our event is centered on the faith-based community's role and responsibilities in addressing the current Israel-Hamas crisis. Tonight we'll talk about how you can actually make a positive impact and contribute to peace in the region. So please use the chat feature whether you're joining us from Facebook Live or on YouTube or joining us via Zoom webinar. Please use the chat feature to ask any questions that you may have along the way. We're privileged to be joined by many representatives from the three organizations who are hosting, but we're really excited to be joined by our other two facilitators. This evening, I'm joined by Ms. Kelly Saunders, who is the Social Secretary for the Embassy of Israel to the United States, as well as Ms. Cheryl Ann Frazier, who is the Director of Community Affairs at the Consulate General of Israel to the Southeastern United States. Good evening, ladies. How are you?
Good evening. Thank you for having us.
So excited to have you. We are really excited to jump into tonight's conversation. As we mentioned, we have three great partners, but one of our great partners is the Philos Project. We'll actually kick it over to our Director of Philos Catholic, Andrew, who will give us a little bit of a historical background.
To be with all of you this evening, and I'm humbled to be invited. You know, I was in Israel on October 7th and had the honor to observe a nation going through a time of terrible grief and trauma, and to witness firsthand their resilience as an outsider, as a friend, as someone who has Muslim, Christian, and Jewish friends serving in the IDF, living in Israel, who are patriotic and fighting to protect Israel against the most vicious terrorist attacks certainly the world has seen since ISIS, and really these went beyond anything ISIS did, in the worst day for the Jewish people since 1945. And I think that's the appropriate place to begin, Wendell, the context of what happened, understanding just how the experience of the Jewish people, especially in Europe during centuries of persecution that culminated in the neo-pagan horrors of the Nazis, and thereafter the Jewish people from both the Middle East and the West coming together to reforge the modern nation of Israel, the modern state of Israel in the land, which had had a continuous Jewish presence. The Jewish people were prepared in the 1930s and 40s as discussion of the recreation of the state. The modern state was underway, a two-state solution to take the smaller portion of land, to take the less arable, less valuable portion of land, and at every turn, every opportunity for peace was rejected. And there's a saying in diplomacy: you can't win at the negotiation table what you lost in the battlefield. And we've seen time and time again a refusal to share the land with the Jewish people. Although I am happy to say that more and more of Israel's neighbors historically have been prepared to make peace with Israel, but we also see a level of savagery that it has been unknown really in the modern era, with the exception of the Nazis. And what Hamas did is in a category of its own in the time since 1945. And I think to see just how so much of the world in Europe, in the West, on elite American campuses has shifted not only against Israel and the Jewish people with outright anti-Semitism, we're seeing justifications for what people are more or less acknowledging is genocidal violence. So, we could discuss, I suppose, just about any narrower area of history, but that's really the context. And it is incumbent upon Christians, first of all, to turn to their own flocks, to turn to their own denominations and to their own faith communities to teach them what's going on. I'm a Catholic. This is something that we find ourselves doing right now. I'm in Ohio, about 45 minutes west of Pittsburgh. We are at Franciscan University with a conference that's been scheduled for months on Catholicism, Judaism, and anti-Semitism. It was set to coincide with the 5-year anniversary of the Tree of Life shooting. A white supremacist, as you may recall, went into a synagogue in Pittsburgh, the most violent anti-Semitic attack in American history, killing 11 Jewish worshipers at the Tree of Life Synagogue, injuring another 6 and traumatizing the entire American Jewish community, the Pittsburgh community, and everyone in America who's standing by looking at the horror of research in anti-Semitism. So we had come together, we've been planning this for almost a year, and we had thought that this was a time to huddle and discuss among Jewish and Catholic friends, but mainly looking at the troubles, looking at the trends within Catholic culture that contribute to anti-Semitism. And then October 7th happened, and we have all seen the response. It's shocking, and you get the sense that lines have been clearly drawn. And our hope is to educate, teach, and bring as many people onto what we believe is the right side, the Abrahamic side, the biblical side, the Christian side that stands with the Jewish people and against the barbarism that we saw on October 7th. And that's going to be culminating with a statement, a coalition statement of Catholics against anti-Semitism and a plan of action. And so looking at the historical context, we thought that was the best path ahead, but we never could have anticipated that October 7th would happen, and now everything is taken on a much greater sense of urgency.
Thank you so much, Andrew. Can you speak specifically to what occurred on October 7th? You mentioned October 7th, just for a bit of background, because what we hear so much now is about what's happening now, and we want those who are listening in to understand that it didn't start with an attack from Israel.
Thank you, Wendell. Yes. Almost to the day, 50 years to the Yom Kippur War, when Israel was really, as a nation, standing down to honor the holy day of Yom Kippur, a day of fasting and prayer and atonement. They were attacked by their neighbors, and 50 years later, on a Jewish holiday that happened to coincide with Shabbat, when most of Israel was honoring the Sabbath, the state of Israel was attacked, and attacked violently by Hamas. And each day, Israel has gone to great pains to share what information it has, both what Hamas has done that they're proud of. Hamas is, someone pointed out the Nazis tried to cover up their crimes. Hamas has been proudly broadcasting their crimes. And just today, the Israelis shared with about 100 foreign journalists video footage from, much of it from Hamas, that documented the horrors of October 7th. And I started to read a summary of it, and I had to stop reading. It was so horrific. I would encourage people who are skeptical of what happened, or who are given to thinking that there's a conspiracy, to begin using their best judgment to research the facts and to establish the truth. And there's nothing wrong with bringing a healthy skepticism to what you see on the internet, It's something that we should have done when there were claims that a hospital in Gaza had been attacked by the IDF. In fact, the casualties were very few, and the hospital was not hit directly. It was a parking lot, and it wasn't an IDF rocket. It was a rocket that was fired by Islamic Jihad. So we ought to be careful, and we ought to bring a healthy level of scrutiny and skepticism to facts as they're presented by news media, on the internet, social media for sure. But I think it's important to say that the facts about October 7th are not disputed by Hamas at this point, and the facts about October 7th are not disputed by Israel, nor anyone covering it. The facts, with the exception of some extreme fringe elements on social media, and I don't know what they're up to, are essentially agreed upon by both sides, and that's that there was a horrific event that Hamas has been proud of. Hamas has been cheering, and Hamas supporters in the West Bank, in Gaza, and around the world have been taking pride in. So I hope that's helpful. The incidents themselves are in some cases too horrific to recount. I was talking to my niece and nephew, who are college students, yesterday, and I didn't want to repeat in front of my 20-year-old niece what had happened. Didn't want to frighten her, terrify her, horrify her. And that was the purpose of what they did. But it was done to children, and they targeted the elderly, they targeted children, they targeted unarmed people and kibbutzes that they knew to be undefended, to have people without weapons. So, yeah, I just wanted to, share that.
Thank you so much, Andrew. I'm going to kick it over to Kelly Saunders, who again is the social secretary at the embassy. Kelly?
Thank you, Wendell and Andrew. Thank you so much for that context. It was super insightful. I'd like to introduce my amazing colleague. Ms. Salsan Hassan is the Minister of Public Diplomacy here at the Embassy of Israel to the United States in Washington, D.C. And she's joining us, and she will provide some additional insight. Salsan, some perceive the current situation in Israel as just another instance of the typical Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Can you elaborate on why the ongoing events are distinct from past occurrences?
Thank you so much, Kelly, and thank you for all the organizers gathering here together. I wish to give the floor first to our Consul General in Atlanta, if it's possible, and I will be honored to answer any questions and to refer to the situation in Israel after that.
Thank you, Sosan, and thank you to all our friends at the Philos Project and Philos Black for arranging this this evening. We are discussing essentially not only Israel at war, but Israel before and after, because October 7th changed Israel as we knew it, and we will have to ensure, there was reference earlier to the images that we have seen of the atrocities that have been committed against our brothers and sisters in Israel. And we will have to ensure that we will never see such images again. And that is what Israel currently is concerned with. Happy to address any questions, of course, but Sosan?
Yes, thank you, Anat. Thank you so much. And Anat is the Consul General of Israel to the Southeastern United States in Georgia. So thank you so much, Anat, for that insight. And I'll kick it over to Sasan.
Thank you, our Consul General. Thank you, Kelly, for that. I want to start with saying that I'm not Jewish. I'm not Jew. I had a Catholic education at a high school. For 4 years, I have been learning in a Catholic school in Israel. And Crystal and some of you here online with us this evening, I had the pleasure to host you last year during Hanukkah for a joint event that shares the diversity of Israel, the uniqueness of the state of Israel and its population. Something that is so unique about our country that has been celebrating it for 75 years with all its diversity, have been brutally harmed on October 7th. When more than 1,000 terrorists infiltrated Israel by land, sea, and air. A few days ago, I was talking in another briefing, and our brothers and sisters from United States were saying that we would like to help you through air and sea and land. And I told them this is exactly the contra of what Hamas terrorists did. They attacked our own people, our own civilians, children, babies, mothers, grandparents, where they were at their home during a holiday. We had Simchat Torah holiday in Sukkot on Saturday, like Andrew said. And it's not like any of the previous attacks that Israel had faced till now. This is the most horrible terrorist attack that ever happened. And this was the day where more Jews were killed after the Holocaust in one day. I can't, I'm now talking from home because I needed to come back to my children who were facing the videos and the horrible things that are going on social media, and feeling this anxiety and stress, exactly like many other kids and people here in the United States. But this is so far from the horrible situation we're having in the state of Israel, with the families who were lost all, who were all killed, butchered, slaughtered, of babies who were burned when they were alive. And Andrew, your testimony is a real voice, is a very important voice of what happened in Israel. You being there in that day, I can only imagine what you have been through. And this is so important that you are sharing this with us tonight. This was the first kind of a harm and an attack that was intending to maximize the harm to civilians. They did not attack the Israeli soldiers. They did not do, if we are talking about proportional attacks, it wasn't in that category at all. It was a pure act of war, a pure act of terrorism. They began murdering campaign, killing families, individuals in their homes, in the streets, in the party that we had, where young people were dancing, celebrating, and abducting citizens to Gaza Strip. More than 200 citizens, also foreigners, were kidnapped. It's a situation we haven't seen before. It's a situation that we need all to be aware of, the level of brutality and of hate and of anti-Semitic action that they did. They didn't kill only Jews. They killed Arabs, people like me who are not Jewish, some of them were Muslims, and they were saying, they were swearing, we're Arabs, we're Muslims. They killed them immediately. They have reached a level of brutality in which they were celebrating what they did all over Gaza Strip. I would say also in so many other Arab countries and Muslim countries. And this brings us in a point where you must heard it before. And it was also said clearly by President Biden. Hamas is ISIS. Hamas is acting exactly like ISIS did, and even worse. This is a terrorist organization that its only purpose is to kill Israelis and to get a control over the whole area of Israel. This is not something that we can affiliate with, that we can feel any kind of a solidarity with. This is not a Palestinian right of having a two-state solution. This is absolutely have nothing to do with that. And this is where our role is actually entering into this scene, where we need to share the real facts, the real evidences. And we need to be very clear on that, crystal clear. This is an absolute terrorism. This is an act of war against the state of Israel, and it will not end in Israel. If they continue to exist, it will get measures, bigger measures, as ISIS did back then and Al-Qaeda did back then, were only their first step. They will continue further to the Western world, and it's in our hands to stop that by raising the awareness of the danger we're facing and by supporting the state of Israel.
Thank you, Salsa.
Sasa, I'm wondering if you can, again, we have a very diverse audience on tonight. If you can perhaps speak to the importance of the United States-Israel relationship, especially for a Christian audience who's gathered online tonight.
75 years ago, President Truman was the first president to sign the recognition letter of the State of Israel. A few months ago, we celebrated 75 years, not only since the establishment of the young state, the young new Jewish state Israel, but also of celebrating the relations and the unique relations and strategic ones between our both countries. Since October 7th, we were all witnessing a very, very strong and solid support of the administration, of the Congress, of the Senate, and of the people all around the United States, the right of Israel for self-defense and the right of Israel to protect, even not the right, it's the obligation of Israel to protect its own people. And understanding that Israel winning this war is actually an important strategic goal for the United States and for the democratic world. The support has been even translated into real actions. Having such a unique visit of the President of the United States, prepared in only 3 days, haven't been done before, never before, visiting the state of Israel and expressing the strong solidarity with the state of Israel, with the people of Israel, visiting the families who lost their members, the families who their members were kidnapped, showing this sympathy with them is a real act of our unique relation, of our special partnership, and our shared values. And what warms our heart is to see that happening among the American people. Yet, I must mention also the rise of anti-Semitism, the rise of the protests supporting Hamas around the United States, the fake news that has been running in different social media channels, on different media channels, even the very, very mainstream ones, telling different and fake news about Israel. And in that, trying to switch the public opinion support from what happened really in Israel, who really started that, how horrible it is, and trying to rise more solidarity toward the Palestinians. We have nothing against the Palestinian people. They are suffering the same way that we are suffering. We have a problem with a terrorist organization that most and foremost is the enemy of the Palestinian people. They are killing their own people. They're using them. They're using the children as a human shield. This is our problem, and this is our joint problem. And this is what needs to be echoed everywhere.
Thank you so much. I'm going to kick things over to Shirley and Fraser at the consulate for our next question.
Thank you, Wendell, and thank you to Philos for having this important discussion tonight. It is my honor to introduce you to Mrs. Anat Sultan Dodon, who serves as the Consul General of Israel to the Southeastern United States. Consul General, it's an honor to serve you, and I have a question for you this evening. There is an increase in what some label as resistance rallies in your region, our region, and other parts of the country. Could you discuss the potential risk associated with such gatherings?
I think that resistance, the term resistance, has no place in discourse these days when we have all been witnessing the atrocities that have been committed, crimes against humanity, and the war crimes that the Hamas terror organization have committed have nothing to do with resistance. They have no political goal in mind. They have a genocidal goal, a declared genocidal goal, the elimination of the state of Israel, and they don't even stop short at that. They call for the murder of Jews worldwide. That has nothing to do with resistance. We are seeing demonstrations calling for a free Palestine from the river to the sea, from the river to the sea, meaning no state of Israel. If one truly cares for the Palestinian people, then one must acknowledge that the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip are oppressed by their own regime, the terror regime that oppresses them and uses them as pawns in their thwarted goal of destroying Israel, destroying the Jews, even at the price of sacrificing their own people. And this so-called resistance and support of such resistance, it needs to be called out. Just like the Nazis would not be considered resistance fighters, and ISIS wouldn't be considered resistance fighters, Al-Qaeda wouldn't be considered resistance fighters. So too, we need to be very, very clear on who and what Israel is facing, because the threat that we face is a threat to Israel, it is a threat to the Jewish people, but it is a threat also to the Palestinian civilians themselves, and it is a threat to any civilized society and to any members of the free world that honor and live the values of freedom, of human rights.
Thank you so much, Anat. I think you speak to the current situation at hand, especially as we do hear people attempting to label supporting Hamas, frankly, as resistance. And you know, I've been watching, my colleagues and I've been watching, and so disheartening to see people label terror as resistance. You know, when this happened on October 7th, and I saw people calling for acts of resistance or a day of resistance, I had to remind people that kidnapping is not resistance, rape is not resistance, murder is not resistance. This is all out terror. And I think it's also a good reminder for those who are watching that what we're seeing is not a war of Israel and Palestine or Israel against Palestinians. It's Israel's response to terror. And this is a war directly between Israel and a terrorist regime. To that point, also want to talk to you, Nana. I know that you've probably seen a lot of support from your region, particularly from politicians and other religious leaders and institution leaders. And I know that those expressing solidarity, we want to make sure that we're saying the right thing. And I want to ask you, what words or actions, you know, are you expecting from your friends and allies in this moment?
Thank you for that. We are incredibly fortunate. My friend and colleague Sosan referred earlier to the robust relations between Israel and the United States and the incredible support that we are seeing now from the United States. We are seeing it in the region as well. You mentioned politicians, but from many, many individuals, organizations, communities. But also we referred to those that not only do not support Israel at this time, but actually side with terror. I would say to all of those who stand with Israel, who stand with humanity, basically, at this time, it is important that everyone calls out those who are siding with terror. They may not say that they are siding with terror, but by supporting those who have committed these atrocities, those who have chosen to behead babies, that is siding with terror. That is siding with an organization whose sole goal is a genocidal goal against Israel and the Jewish people. And that needs to be called out. And another thing that needs to be called out, it's not just the demonstrations. We saw a week ago, international media, including American media, when a hospital was hit in Gaza, we saw the media quick to take the word of a terror organization over facts, over not just the word of what Israel and the IDF was saying, but what it was presenting. Because everything pointed to the fact that it had not been an IDF attack that hit that hospital. And I think that needs to be called out. The media needs to be held accountable. Organizations, individuals, politicians, whoever chooses to side with a terror organization needs to be called out. There is only one place to stand if you stand for humanity, and that is to stand with Israel, because that is what we are standing for.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Consul General, and thank you for the passion that you deliver it with. We need to hear it, and we need to hear the truth. So thank you for bringing the truth to the forefront. I would like to introduce to you all Mr. Luke Moon, Deputy Director of Philos Project. Deputy Director Moon, could you provide some background on the Philos Project and share how its work has adapted to promote friendship and understanding in the current Israel-Hamas conflict or war?
Yeah, we were started in 2014, really to at the time it was the height of ISIS's spread across Iraq. We were raising awareness about the issue of persecuted Christians under the area of ISIS, and over the years we have been raising awareness about Christian persecution and also Christian support for Israel and Jewish people. And so we had a lot of, on a normal Saturday morning, we had a lot of plans for the next week. And we all woke up to a new reality. And because we had been already planning and knowing at some point there would be another conflict, we actually had a playbook ready. We already knew what we needed to do. We rallied our staff when we got word. I woke up probably about 6:30 that morning on Saturday. We had a staff meeting by 11. By 2 o'clock, we had our first briefing call. By 4 o'clock, we had planned our first rally in New York and in Washington, D.C. for the following day on Sunday. And on Monday, we had a 12-hour prayer and fasting time for Israel. All of that was because we knew at some point there would be another conflict between Hamas and Israel, because for some reason Hamas I think we all know why, but Hamas is committed to the extermination of the Jewish people. And so it was only a matter of time, but we were ready for it. And we encouraged everyone in our network to rally in support, to show friendship, to show up in friendship. We encouraged our members to post statements and bring flowers and host rallies, have prayer vigils, talk about it in their church, talking about it in their community. And it's, we are the word out there is never again. And we're committed to making sure that, as far as the Christians are concerned, we're going to stand with Israel 100%, and be faithful friends and allies.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Luke. Thank you
Yep.
for that. Next, I'd like to introduce Crystal Bracey. She is the director of Philos Black. Hi, Crystal.
Hi, Kelly.
Crystal, we have a question for you. Philos Black has been actively engaged in the past 2 weeks. Could you highlight some of the initiatives undertaken by Philos Black in their network, and also offer insights into how others, particularly Black pastors, can participate in these efforts?
Thank you for the question, Kelly. I would be delighted. For the past now 17 days, we have had leaders who have been on the news and leading conversations in and around the country. They've made important statements on several different platforms. We have been very impactful on our social media outlets, Philos Black in particular, and also the leaders in our network. We put something together called a pastor's toolbox, and shared it with all of the leaders in our network and allowed them to share it outside of the network. Congregations really need to be informed. We encourage safe spaces and brave spaces to hold conversations and ask questions about what's happening in Israel and in Gaza without the fear of being judged. So the Pastor's Toolbox is a resource that guides pastors on how to host conversations in their churches, how to, bring it up. What are some of the things that you can say that would help you to lead out a conversation with your parishioners? We've also collaborated with the Philos Action League in taking white roses to our local Jewish synagogues, community centers, or Hillel centers. Of course, White Roses pays homage to the White Rose Nazi resistance group from Germany in the 1940s. So we do that as a sign of solidarity to let our Jewish sisters and brothers know that we are standing with them and that we're praying with them. As Luke mentioned, we did host a 12-hour prayer vigil. We had over 1,000 people that joined our prayer vigil from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. On the East Coast. We had representation, I believe, in 3 countries, including Israel. So people reached out in Israel to say what a blessing it was to them and how encouraging it was to know that people were around the world praying for them. We are aware that where we can't go, our prayers can reach in those spaces. At the Philos Project, we're actively fundraising. We're fundraising for response efforts to be able to send money to those who are in need. And so that's another means of advocacy, raising money for those that are on the ground. So yes, for those that want to get involved or desire more information, you can visit our website, www.philosproject.org. We're on all social media platforms, or you can shoot an email to us personally. We're at Philos Black. We're at philosblack@philosproject.org. And if you send an email, we are happy to respond to you, to connect you with our PAL team, and to share tangible ways that you can get involved or that you can respond. We welcome that, actually. So
thank you so much. Thank you so much, Crystal. I know we've been doing a lot of work at Philos Black, and you and I talk pretty much all day, every day. As we grapple with this information, especially the Black community, we talk about it, we see propaganda. How do we deal with and how do we navigate this environment and make informed decisions with perspectives that we actually align with?
Absolutely. So my colleague Andrew covered a lot of this when he said, pay attention to the facts. And I think others also mentioned it on the call, talking about the misinformation around the hospital bombing in Gaza or whatnot. Pay attention to the facts. Listen, today is the 17th day, I believe, of the war. I've suggested to others that if your source has only been doing this work for 17 days, then you probably need to find another source. Okay, so experts that we listen to and news that we take in really needs to be from trusted and credible sources, which can be difficult to assess in an area of information overload. But what my suggestions are, first and foremost, avoiding social media as the sole source of your information. Okay, that's very problematic, deeply problematic. On social media, if that's the only place you're turning to, there's lots of misinformation, lots of bias on social media platforms. You want to avoid sensationalism and clickbait. Be very wary of sources that use sensationalized headlines or overly emotional language. News organizations that are legitimate are always going to strive for objectivity. And lastly, just recognize that even reputable sources may have biases, but it is important to really seek out and consult a variety of sources that back their claims, that provide evidence in order to get a balanced perspective. So I won't share individual sources on this platform, but just remember the goal is accuracy, objectivity, and transparency. And finally, let me add this point, Wendell, because we are a Christian community, fast, pray, and read the word of God and allow the Holy Spirit to lead you and to inform your instincts.
I think that's a great point. And it's so easy, Crystal. We're just used to tapping into our everyday news. We have to remember that the current war is not one that's in the United States. And so it's so important to be reading from publications that are on the ground. And also, like you said, if they've been on, I like that quote, I'm at the bar, that they've only been reporting for the last 17 days on this issue, then that might not be the most reliable source. I'm gonna go ahead and bring our colleague Liza into our discussion. Liza has a wealth of knowledge and background. Liza is actually the director of the Charles Malik Institute at the Philos Project. Thank you for joining us this evening, Liza.
Thank you for having me, guys.
I want to I call Liza like our mini genius on staff. Liza knows everything about everything. I want to specifically talk about Hamas, right? I want to distinguish Gaza from Hamas. I want to distinguish Palestinians from Hamas. Can you talk about how Hamas and these other Iranian-backed regimes, these other Iranian-backed terror groups affect the region, and how we can anticipate any repercussions in Lebanon and some of the other places in the region?
Thank you, Wendell. That's a good question. And it is very important, just like you said, to distinguish Hamas from basically everything else. This isn't fundamentally an Israeli-Palestinian conflict. This is Israel versus Hamas, a terrorist organization. And it also is the well-being of Palestinians versus Hamas. Now, to turn our attention to Iran, it is difficult to overemphasize Iran's role in perpetuating terrorism and instability in the Near East. In 2020, the State Department estimated that Iran gave Hezbollah $700 million a year and $100 million annually to Palestinian groups, including Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad. So Hamas and Hezbollah are two of Iran's most valuable assets, both for strategic value and in sheer economic terms. So realistically, Iran might dissuade Hezbollah from opening up a new front because Iran needs Hezbollah's massive arsenal as a retaliatory measure against any potential Israeli attack on its nuclear sites. I don't think they would want to expend this asset on a different conflict. And remember, in 2006, when Hezbollah abducted 2 Israeli soldiers, resulting in war, that angered Tehran because they said Ahmad Muganaya wasted the missile arsenal on something unnecessary. And since then, they've imposed more control on Hezbollah. I also think that the mostly coherent deterrence measures from the United States, including the 2 aircraft carriers in the Mediterranean, if continued, will likely keep Lebanon out of the fray.
Thank you so much, Liza. And again, it's also important to think about this current war as not just Israel and Hamas. It also impacts not just the Near East, but it impacts us as Americans as well. And speaking of the Charles Malik Institute a little bit earlier, and for those of you who don't know, Charles Malik was a Lebanese philosopher, diplomat, and theologian. So it intersects with all of the things that we are geeked out about at the Philos Project. And he made a significant amount of contributions to human rights, and he also played a key role in drafting the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And you can maybe go into briefly about Malik a little bit, but we know that he faced a lot of terror during his lifetime. But he wrote extensively on how Christians should respond. And so I just wanted to know if you can share with us a little bit about the book he wrote, Christ in Crisis, and how we might be able to apply that to how we should respond as Christians in moments like this.
Thank you, Wendell. That's a great question. I always say that Charles Malik is the most important person everyone somehow forgot about. If you want to go down a little internet rabbit hole, visit our website, charlesmalikinstitute.org, and you'll find lots of great information. But that book that you mentioned, Wendell, is exactly where I would point and have been pointing everybody in this time of crisis. It's literally called Christ in Crisis, and in some ways is a modern city of God grappling with the questions of what are Christians to do in the face of crumbling civilizations and existential threats and troubles on every border. And he opens up that book with the very first paragraph of the very first chapter saying, there are three unpardonable sins today: to be flippant or superficial in the analysis of the world situation, to live and to act as though half-hearted measures would avail, and to lack the moral courage to rise to the historic occasion, to err intellectually, to be sloppy or slothful in one's mode of living, and in any case to play the coward. These things can easily doom Western civilization, either through some sudden world cataclysm or through the slow decay and death that come from paralysis of fear. So I would say heed those words from Malik. Don't be sloppy or superficial in the analysis of the world situation. And whatever you do, refuse to play the coward. What we need more than ever is moral clarity in this situation. So rise up to it with that in mind is my advice. And read Christ in Crisis. It's a short little book that has so much to say about our particular moment.
Thank you so much, Liza. I'll turn it over to Kelly with a question for Bob.
Yes, Bob, thank you so much for that insight and for that book. I will definitely be reading that. So to Bob, who is the Minister for Engagement, he's the Director of Ministry Engagement for Christians United for Israel. Bob, are you there?
It looks like we lost Bob for a second. Oh, he's rejoining us. I'll actually go ahead and bring Reverend Brisbane from Dillard University on while we get Bob reconnected. Rev, good evening. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for the invite. Certainly it's an honor and a privilege to be among the saints.
It's always good to see you, Rev. And Rev actually served as our most recent trip chaplain on our summer bus that we took to Israel. Rev, you have been leading as the interim director at Dillard University, the National Center for Black-Jewish Relations. And almost within days after the attack on Israel, you and Dr. Ford wrote and released a statement from the National Center on behalf of Dillard University and the center. Likewise, President Thomas and Dean Carter at Morehouse also released statements. Could you share the motivations behind your actions and explain the significance of historically Black colleges and universities in speaking out on such matters and why we, what role we play in this current war?
Sure. Thank you, Wendell, for asking such powerful question. One of the things that we were very clear of, the motivation behind the statement, our primary motivation was to promote understanding and dialogue between the Black and the Jewish community. The National Center for Black-Jewish Relations at Dillard University was established to address historical issues and build bridges between these communities. And so we believe in the power of open and respectful communication to achieve our mission. And, the responsibility to address the global event, because one of the things we are very clear of, a threat to justice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And so the recent attack to Israel had far-reaching consequences affecting communities worldwide, including those in the United States. And as an institution dedicated to fostering harmony and understanding, we felt a responsibility to respond thoughtfully. Note what I said, thoughtfully and constructively to the significant international event. Because one of the things we were very clear that the role of the HBCU, or the Historically Black College University, has a rich history of advocating for social justice, for civil rights and equality. And HBCU serves as a platform for addressing critical issues that impact marginalized communities. And what we're dealing with is marginalized individuals at this moment. And these institutions plays a pivotal role in facilitating dialogue between diverse groups, including African American and the Jewish community, or anyone that is oppressed. And so the HBCU operates as a catalyst for change. And so here we are at a hub of learning and education, providing space for constructive dialogue and collaboration on important societal issues. And so when we look at the HBCU, we take a stand on international matters. It highlights the interconnectedness of the global event with the local communities. And so HBCUs can serve as a catalyst to be change for change by promoting peace, understanding, and constructive dialogue during times of conflict. And so there was a joint statement that was formed. And so along with those issued by other institutions like Morehouse, demonstrates a unified commitment by promoting peace and understanding and collaborating between the HBCUs, because Dr. Ford was very key in initiating that. And just early on, she had been in a meeting with the president of Yeshiva, and who had experienced the harshness of what's taking place there. And so it was in that she began to work in collaboration with them to formulate a response, and not only there, but also helping us to frame our initial stance, because it was one that we were very clear that it was about hate that we wanted to address. We wanted to address an end of anti-Semitic behavior and in prejudicial behavior. And so building those bridges and finding common grounds was essential for us moving forward. And our goal is to build bridges that unite and that don't divide, but unite and find common ground between communities with historical ties and shared values. And we believe that the open dialogue and collaboration can and will lead to a deeper understanding of each other's perspective. By working together, we can contribute to a more peaceful and inclusive society.
Thank you so much, Rev. I'm going to go ahead and bring everyone back on. We have questions that have been pouring in from the audience who's joining us online via YouTube and Facebook, as well as Zoom. One of the questions talks about, it asks, why do the Palestinian people show such huge support globally for Hamas? And perhaps why is Hamas often or why often confuse Palestinians with Hamas? Liza, do you want to take a stab at that one?
Sure. So I think a big part of the problem is just lack of knowledge, because just as Crystal said, most of the world wasn't paying attention to this until 17 days ago. And when that's the case, and you're very quick to just jump on board with whatever narratives you're hearing, whatever your favorite celebrities are saying on social media, or your neighbor 2 doors down is saying, and you're not actually enmeshed in the history of what's going on, there's no way that you're going to know the difference between Israel and the West Bank and Hamas and Gaza and the many peace deals that have come across the desk of Palestinians over the last 75 years, and the influence of Iran and all the other mitigating factors that are essential if you're going to actually understand what's happening here. So I think it is just the paying attention only in the last 17 days and not having the broader historical knowledge to know what's going on, and not having the wisdom to then be quiet and seek knowledge before broadcasting your opinions on the topic.
Yeah, and one of the other questions specifically was about the Black Lives Matter movement, and some folks from some of the chapters endorsing some of the rallies that we spoke of earlier. And to that point, Liza, I think there are people who often confuse that this is the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, and it's not. Sultan, you mentioned earlier that this is not like what you've seen before. And what makes it not like what you've seen before? There was a massacre that occurred on October 7th, right? There was raping and kidnapping that occurred on October 7th. And in the aftermath, we also we understand that this is directly related to terror from an organization. It's important to distinguish what Hamas is from other Palestinians. Hamas is a regime that has controlled Gaza since 2005, when Israel withdrew from Gaza completely. So I think it's also important to understand this is not about occupation. This is not about resistance. It was a planned attack. It was intentional. It was on a day of worship. It was on a day of rest. There were young people who were involved in this that were also intending to also enjoy a concert. I think it's also important for us to understand that in Hamas's attack, they didn't just attack Israelis. We just saw yesterday or the day before, there were 2 American hostages that were just released. There are Americans and other citizens from other countries who were also impacted by this very large terrorist attack. And to Anat's point, I think that it's important to understand the current role of everyone in the current crisis, so that we don't easily sway to this just being another conversation about a 2-state solution, or a conversation about just calls for peace between Israelis and Palestinians. That's not what's at play here. The next question that we have from the chat, from Clinton, he says, in conversations about the war, I often hear of condemnation of Israel's actions during war, and Israel's treatment of Palestinians as unjust for decades. How do you respond to accusations about Israel's current or past actions towards Palestinians? Andrew, can you talk a little bit about the Israel-Palestinian relations over the last 75 years, and maybe even speak to how Arab treatment of Palestinians in the last 75 years, what that's looked like?
Absolutely, Wendell. I think the first thing I would say is that what we see in the press internationally, what we see on social media, so many of the trends really reveal that Israel has to bear the moral weight of Israel's conduct, and Israel has to bear the moral weight of its opponents and those who are attacking it. And that's more weight than anybody could bear, right? And so what's also very clear is that there's a very intelligent, very shrewd, and I would say kind of diabolical way that information is manipulated to prey upon. In some ways, it's a very noble sentiment to want to take the weaker side. As a Catholic, Philos Latino, Philos Black, and Philos Catholic. Black, Latino, and Catholic groups huddled earlier this year. I mean, we're all talking about how similar the strains of anti-Semitism were in each of our communities that we were dealing with, and it was really interesting. And it was we all, I think, learned a great deal. We saw a lot of similarities. We saw a lot of differences, and this is something we see. This is, anti-Semitism is something that is present in every community, divides so many communities right down the middle. We're struggling with it right now in the Catholic community. There are all these challenges. There are similarities, and in some ways they're unique. I think it goes much deeper than the last 17 days in disinformation. I think people bring a bias against the Jewish people. Sometimes it's unconscious. I see it among Catholics. There's a tendency to be skeptical of information in very much the same way. There's a tendency to have class resentment. There's a tendency to believe in conspiracy theories about the Jewish people in power. So this is all pretty common. But just one last point, Wendell. I think if you look at the fact that there is one place in the Middle East, one place where Palestinians have equal citizenship, where Palestinians can enter public service, can be part of a community. One place where after 1948, diverse Palestinian views and identities are tolerated and there's equality before the law. No country's perfect. Good God, America's certainly evidence of that, right? But Israel is the place where 20% of the population is Palestinian, and that's why Israel has been very quick to point out that many of the rescuers, many of the heroes on October 7th were Arab Israelis, very proud citizens who were defending their countrymen against an unspeakably violent and heinous attack by Hamas. So I don't want to go on too long. I could go on at length, but I'm probably well over my 2 minutes. So I'll pass it back to you, Wendell. Thank you.
I would
Thank
like
you.
to add, if
Thank you.
possible, very shortly.
Yeah. I just want to real quick. Go ahead, Anat.
I would like to say to anyone that is asking, what is Israel doing or been doing for the Palestinians, aside from the fact that not only did Israel accept the 1947 United Nations Partition Plan, has declared in our Declaration of Independence that our hand is extended in peace and to all our neighbors, has had multiple times the willingness and was already pen in hand with different peace agreements on the table that the Palestinians refused to sign. The question, therefore, should be turned the other way around. What has Palestinian leadership done for the Palestinians? And when will Palestinian leadership finally say the truth to their own people, that there will not be self-determination for the Palestinians if there will not be a recognition of the Jewish people's right for self-determination in the state of Israel, in our ancient homeland?
Thank you for that, Anat. I will say that, and to that point, the other question that we raise often is what the other Arab states are doing in the current crisis. We view that Israel is the only Jewish state. Both the West Bank and Gaza are neighbored by Arab states as well, and so we should be asking, what is Jordan doing? What is Egypt doing specifically? And as Anat mentioned, there have been numerous occasions in which there have been peace treaties that have been drafted. But the greater point is what we're dealing with now is a war against a terror regime that controls part of the Palestinian territory. And that's what is at hand. That's what's different. That's what's different about the last 75 years. But you have an organization that within its charter, its sole purpose is to eradicate not just the state of Israel, but Jews worldwide. It created dangerous situations, not just in the state of Israel, but that is dangerous for Jews worldwide. It's also dangerous for Christians worldwide. And so we have to be very calculated in our response to the war at hand. We cannot lean in and make way to support terror. We have to, without hesitation, call out this terror, and without hesitation, not only call for peace, but not be afraid to say that terror has no room in Israel. Terror has no room across the world. And so Crystal alluded to earlier, there are many ways that you can get involved. There are many ways that you can act. One of those ways, coming up this Thursday, we'll have a day of action from the Philos Action League. Details have been shared to your emails. If you are actually interested in how you can get involved, you can follow us. We're Philos Project on all of our platforms, and if you can also share more detail how you can be involved on Thursday. Philos Black is actually having a global day of prayer on Sunday. Crystal also mentioned the Pastor's Toolbox. If you're interested in accessing tools for church, your congregation, please reach out to us. That's not exclusive to Philos Black. It's available for all clergy. And even if you're just a community organizer and you want to figure out ways to get involved, of course, there are, and especially for our Philos Black community, we understand that what hurts one of us globally hurts all of us globally. And there are Black people in Israel, as many of us have seen on our numerous trips to the Holy Land. And so they too are being impacted. We have specifically set up fundraisers to assist with our efforts for those communities. So if you're interested in getting involved, please reach out to us. We have your emails. We'll also continue to follow up with you on ways you can get involved there. So we thank all of you for joining this evening. We will continue with these conversations. We want you to be informed. As always, we encourage you to receive the correct information, stay on top of what's happening, and stay involved. So again, thank you for joining us this evening. Thank you to all of our guests and our speakers who joined us from the embassy, the consulate, and Philos, and as well as you, Rev, joining us from Dillard University. So thank you all, and we pray that you have a great evening.